2019. Could I have disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof? Seeing none, we'll move into delegations, and the first up is Immigration in Waterloo and collaboration with the City of Waterloo. And today we have Karen Spencer and Perry Karam speaking. Welcome, and welcome to the support group too.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council members. Thank you so much for having us here this evening to talk to you a little bit about why we believe immigration matters. And I would just like to say that we also have Tara Bedard present, who is the executive... She was tricking me. The executive director of the partnership. I am the chair of the immigration partnership, and Puri is the co-chair. So, who we are and what we do. So the Immigration Partnership is a collaboration of over 110 people from over 60 community service, municipal, business, post-secondary, and other organizations and individual residents who have been working together for over 10 years to empower immigrants and refugees to successfully settle, work, and belong. Staff from the City of Waterloo's Community Services team joined the Immigration Partnership a number of years ago, where they are part of our welcoming and inclusive municipalities group, and we have greatly valued their partnership. Today, we have worked across the urban municipalities and Waterloo region to develop joint outreach and information sessions to engage new immigrants in the area municipalities and to help them understand their municipal services. And we have created space for awareness raising and conversation on immigration topics by co-hosting events like the Waterloo Region Global Migration Film Festival. Canada is growing immigration levels every year because immigration matters to communities across the country. Waterloo is no exception. Everyone has a role to play in making sure that immigration works in communities and that the mutual benefits to communities and to immigrants are fully leveraged. Municipalities play a particularly important role. So Waterloo Region and Waterloo has always welcomed immigrants. In the 2016 census, immigrants made up almost 1/4 of the region's population and just over 25% of Waterloo's population. In Waterloo, that is over 26,000 residents. From 2008 to 2017, annual permanent resident arrivals in Waterloo stayed level, largely due to an increase in refugee making Waterloo their home at a time when Canada grew national immigration levels. This is only the permanent immigrant population. In addition, we have a temporary migrant population that has grown significantly in the last 5 years, one that I think you will all be familiar with, and that is international students, temporary foreign workers in our tech sector, and other industries and refugee claimants seeking protection in Canada. More temporary than permanent residents enter Waterloo Region each year. The majority of them are international students, many living in Waterloo, and a growing number of them will seek to permanently stay in Canada. At this size, the Immigration Partnership believes it is important to be intentional as a community about supporting this population's success. Are immigrants, regardless of their status, being welcomed? Are they settling, working in meaningful jobs, and growing successful businesses? Do they have a sense of belonging? Are they able to give back to the community? And I would ask us all to take a look at what are their outcomes? How do they compare to the rest of the population? Do we see systemic barriers to their success? Through the Immigration Partnership, we identify priorities and set community actions to empower immigrants and refugees living in this community to succeed, which feed into organizational level actions among partners.
Why immigration matters. Statistics Canada data shows that new international immigration is the main driver of population growth in Ontario and Waterloo region. Canada needs new sources of talent to enter the labor force to maintain its high living standards. The Conference Board of Canada reports that between 2018 and 2040, immigration will account for all of Canada's net labor force growth and 1/3 of economic growth rate. Statistic Canada reports have found that immigrant-owned firms are more likely to be job creators and that on average immigrants donate more to charity. Other research has found that immigrants consume art and culture at higher rates than Canadian-born individuals, and that immigration is the driver of arts and culture in Canada. In short, when immigrants succeed, communities thrive. Waterloo and Waterloo region are impacted by all of this. While some immigrants and refugees settle and find belonging and success in quickly, others struggle. Immigration is an increasingly important factor in strengthening Waterloo and Waterloo region's quality of life, community, social and economic development, and there is a pressing social and economic imperative for municipalities like Waterloo to attract, retain, and effectively integrate the robust immigration and refugee population. So what would we like to see? While immigration is a federal mandate, it is in communities like Waterloo and Waterloo region that the successes and challenges of immigration play out. Municipalities across Canada are increasingly taking a holistic view and approach to immigrant attraction, retention, and integration. Underline attraction, retention, and integration. We encourage further engagement and partnerships with Waterloo City Council and the City of Waterloo across departments in a manner that addresses this spectrum. We invite wider involvement of city staff across departments in our steering groups and events. The one that is coming up, Waterloo Region Immigration Forum, which is coming up in November 2019, where we will look at where we would like to be as a region on immigration in 10 years. We also invite you to support our immigrant survey, which is currently open. This is a place where every other year we gather input from all immigrants across the region on their experiences of living here. So we know how to better support them, and this information will enrich the city's planning. We also offer our engagement and support in city planning and service improvement processes. As partnership, we recently submitted suggestions for the city's draft strategic plan, which reflect the effective learning of our work, and we hope it will strengthen that work, and we will look forward to deep engagement in support of the city planning and service improvement in the future. We also invite Waterloo City Council to act as a strong advocate on immigration matters and immigrants and refugees in Waterloo with the federal and provincial governments, so that everyone living in Waterloo and the region can thrive. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Perry and Karen. Questions for the delegates? Please, go ahead. Councillor Bonagar.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. I just want to thank you for coming in and talking to us. I am an immigrant, and I know how much Canada offers immigrants, but I also know how much immigrants can offer Canada. And when I arrived here, I landed in a city where I couldn't find any supports like that. I was very lucky. I was able to thrive regardless. But the fact that you are offering help to people from day one, and you're looking for ways to keep offering that help and deepening that help is really valuable. So I want to thank you for doing that. But I am curious, how do you make connections and find these new immigrants, if especially ones like me who don't even know that supports like that exist?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Thank you for your question and for your statement. It is true. It's important for us to pay attention to the needs of immigrants and refugees, and how you meet their needs and where do you find them. When people come to Canada, if they come through the 4 categories that Karen has mentioned as permanent residents, most likely they have done their research. Majority of them will have enough language ability and they know where they're heading. So they make their research, and through their interviews with Immigration, Refugee Citizenship Canada, they will be informed to go to those settlement agencies in whichever region they end up living in. Also, government-sponsored refugees among those groups. However, other groups that are coming on their own, or the second category that Karen mentioned, it's a little bit more difficult. And realistically speaking, we don't have those agencies that are offering those services. The settlement agencies do not have enough resources to effectively promote their services. So it will depend really on individuals' capability and capacity to find out our services. However, as a collective within the immigration partnership, when we bring all service providers together, we have representation from all of these categories. So you have agencies who are helping, refugee claimants. You have agencies who are helping those who agencies funded by the federal government are not helping. So we have a collective and representation of all kinds of immigration categories. And it's our hope through those service providers, we get the word out. And it's through them we get to know the needs of immigrants and refugees. But we definitely can improve.
Thank you for that.
Councillor Vasek, Councillor Bodley.
Thanks through you, Mayor. Thanks for your presentation. My question or comments both is around, you gave so many great ideas about what we can do as a council to come out and support, but similar to Councillor Bonagor saying what immigrants have to offer to the community, I'm really curious about what are some of the barriers that people face to getting involved in things that are happening at the city, more broadly, giving input, but then also committee representation, and then also just a plug that I think that we do a second round of committee applications next year.
Yeah, it's 2 years, every 2 years.
Every 2 years, so that'll probably be end of next year. So just as an FYI, when you're doing things, if people say that they want to get involved in the city, that'll be happening at the end of 2020. So anyways, barriers, please, thank you.
So in terms of barriers, again, there is no one point of barrier that we can say that is the challenge and we can tackle it and move on. There are multi-layers of barriers for immigrants, even those who have the language ability and the competencies to participate in on such committees. I think lack of access to information. I also think a lot of people, even if they have the talent and the ability, they don't know they can participate. And I think we can play a key role on Immigration Partnership Council to get that word out. And if you have your next, election, I think we participated in the past too, but you can definitely let the partnership know. Through that connection and that network we have, we can spread the word and we can better, prepare immigrants to be active participants, because a lot of people are eager to be really, many people are extremely proud citizens. One of our staff just became a citizen last week and we had a party for him. He was crying. He's an older gentleman. And he said, none of you understand what I'm going through. And I said, I think I do, because I was stateless. And just that feeling of belonging to a country like Canada, when you spend the first 30 years of your life not feeling you belong anywhere. A lot of people are in that position, and a lot of people are eager to become, citizens of this country and to give back and to participate. I think we just need to do a better job in linking both together. very good comment. I appreciate your comment. But please do let the partnership know, and through Tara and the partnership, we can spread the word and better prepare people to participate.
Councillor Bodley next.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Jaworski. Yeah, I really wanted to echo what Councillor Vasic had said about really strikes me on the committees that I sit on that are advising council and giving us information and trying to direct the way that the city is going, that we may have a little bit of an echo chamber going on those committees, and perhaps people who are new to the city or new to the country maybe don't have the specific expertise that we're looking for on some of the committees, but learned expertise and learned experiences that they have in their life are just as valuable to us to understand how and what direction we should be moving in. So just wanted to echo that. But I also had a question. Do you have, you had mentioned that just over 25% of the population in the city is of permanent residents or immigrants. Do we have any further data that breaks that down into where specifically they are from? And if you could speak to maybe some of the challenges dealing with people that are coming here from sort of all over the world, if there are any specific challenges that you deal with therein.
Absolutely. There are data, there is data available through Statistic Canada. If you want to go and search and look for the region of Waterloo and the city of Waterloo. What is common about immigrants and refugees is just really that they come at a certain point of time to Canada. The word immigrants, that's what's common among them. Even people who are coming from the same region, within the same country, within the same city, they're very diverse and they're very different. If I make a comment, look at us around this room, can we say we are all common and have the same challenge or the same expertise and have the same talent if we go to another country and one of us can represent all of us? I think that is not possible. But the diversity will, I would say, exists among one immigration category. The diversity exists among even people who come through business class. They bring a lot of money, millions of dollars. They start from $500,000 and above, and they will not succeed. And a lot of times, sometimes they leave the country because they cannot thrive and succeed with their business plan. While we have refugees with PhD degrees, they do struggle through the first 5 to 6, 8 years of their life. My cousin is one of them now in Nova Scotia. He's a family physician. And then they get to walk through their qualifications and they become productive members of the society. I think the labeling of one group or one country is not a realistic kind of assumption around the talent. But you're absolutely right, and I totally agree with you, reflecting on my personal experience as an immigrant and a lot of people around me. People have the hunger, I assure you. Immigrants have the hunger, because for immigrants, it's like an opportunity to have a life that you have chosen. Imagine you wake up, you want to choose your life instead of the life that half of it was probably inherited to you. Then you want to do it really right. You want to do absolutely what all the mistakes you have done through your life, you want to fix them. There is the hunger and there is the humble. The humble is another key people learn from immigrants who have gone through a lot of hardship in their life. And I see that contributes a lot positively in a lot of workplaces from the feedback we hear from employers, how their workplace have changed from those attitudes that immigrants bring their work to their workplace. The smart is there, but you're absolutely right. Soft skills, there will be ongoing training need for those individuals. Cultural training, absolutely needed. A lot of people will struggle with both. And if we have people who want to participate on these kind of committees, they will need those kind of training. And I think that would be the level of support that you can provide to them. Very good question. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And earlier today we had our City Waterloo Strategic Plan, and there's 2 key areas of 6 that were approved. One is equity, inclusion, and a sense of belonging, and healthy community and resilient neighborhoods. I think those really speak to it. I know whenever I go visit the Sunnydale neighborhood, a lot of newcomers, they say, "Oh, no, thanks for coming. Councillor Veith has been here 4 times this month." So hard to keep up with the counselors, but anyway, I think this counselor certainly set the bar of what we'd like to see in the coming term, and the city management was here and now taken to prepare their business plans. We've certainly all been here to hear you. So thank you very much, and look forward to your immigration forum in November.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
Next up, KW4 Ontario Health Team proposal with Dr. Jolie presenting. First up is not Dr. Jolie, but Dr. Jim Bowman. Welcome, Dr. Jim.
I'm not a doctor, let's make that perfectly clear. Dear members of council, members of the community, fellow colleagues, over the years, the City of Waterloo, numerous health providers in this area has delivered programs and health-related services to our community. These programs have been supported by a grant from the Province of Ontario to the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care. These grants have been managed through an agreement with the Waterloo-Wellington LHINs, or Local Health Integrated Network, for those who may not know that acronym. As you are aware, the province is modernizing Ontario healthcare at this time. The plan is being accomplished by consolidating the local LHINs, including Waterloo-Wellington, under the single roof of Ontario Health. As such, this evening, the real Dr. Jolie from the Centre of Family Medicine is going to present the work thus far with a group called KW4, of which the City of Waterloo is part of, and will be working in the development of healthcare in this area. Dr. Lee.
Thanks, Jim. I am Joe. And thank you very much for having me speak this evening. I spoke to the regional council before, and I know Mayor Jaworski was kind enough to encourage me to speak here tonight. And I'd like to just basically answer questions you may have about the proposal. I'll go through some slides here to say. So just to let you know, KW4 is a term that we developed a couple of years ago in healthcare for Kitchener, Waterloo, and then the 3W townships by us, Woolwich, Wellesley, and Wilmot. And the reason why that's clustered together, because in healthcare terms, that's how it functions. So with the two hospitals, the medical staff, much of the healthcare sector kind of relates to itself in that organizational framework. So the Ministry of Health has an ambitious plan for Ontario. I think that's fair to say. Yes, the dissolution of the LHINs across the province and 6 major agencies into this massive agency called Ontario Health. I'm a family physician. I've been here in KW for 31 years. My wife is also a family physician. I've been involved in lots of stuff, helping to create the downtown regional medical school and the pharmacy school and lots of stuff. To us and to many in healthcare, this is the biggest change in healthcare in Ontario ever. And I don't say that lightly. And it's very ambitious. If you look at the slides, I mean, they're very nice things the government says that we should be doing. We should be working together. We should be for the betterment of the citizens of Ontario. And it's very hard to argue against the lofty vision and goals of that. I think, I think most of us believe in our hearts we can do better. We can serve the people of this region better, cheaper, and do it in a happy fashion. This Ontario Health, it's just created. It's bare bones right now. They have an interim CEO, they have a new board, and they have virtually no actual structure stuff right now. And you're talking about the biggest expenditure in Ontario, the Ontario budget. There is something called a quadruple aim. The quadruple aim is what I was saying. It's the vision for this, which is a good vision, I think. Most people would say, we should have better experiences for the people we serve. We should have better outcomes for the populations that we serve. We should have good value for the money we spend, because we spend a lot of money in healthcare, and it should be good for the healthcare providers so we don't burn everybody up into a little crisp. And so that is the quadruple aim. For our area, in what is or was our LIN, we had 4 subregions. So there's the Guelphin area, there's the rural Wellington area, there's Cambridge and North Dumfries, and then we are KW4, as I say, Kitchener, Waterloo, and the 3 W townships nearby. We are by far the largest area in the LIN. We have more than half the population of the LIN. It's about 395,000 citizens in our proposal. It's a new model. It's to have teams be created to share funding. It bundles funding of hospitals and every major healthcare institution in this region together to work for people together. The province has stated they are aiming for 30 to 50 of these teams across the province, roughly serving a population of 300,000. There is a timeline, again, an ambitious timeline, which is a little behind, not surprisingly. We did submit for our KW4 area an application on May 15th. We are in process. The Deputy Minister has contacted me to say that they have received it and they are reviewing it. They will let us know in early July what the status of our application is, and the first Ontario Health teams will be designated in the fall, and there will be a rollout starting in the fall of this major transformation of healthcare. That's just some of the timelines. Because we don't feel like we can boil the ocean, there's a focus that we want to have in our region. And there's 2 major drivers for what the focus is. One is what's the need of the population here, and secondly, where have we had collaborative success in this region? And the 2 areas are the medically complex and socially vulnerable, and the second are the frail elderly. So for the medically complex and socially vulnerable, we're talking about homeless folks or people who have unstable housing. You heard about immigrants and refugees. Those often have social and medical complexity. We do have a number of programs that in healthcare that do transcend many sectors. Working hospital, primary care, long-term care, many crossing the many sectors of healthcare together with various programs. For the frail elderly, that is another area where we have had need and success. The demographics of the population are aging. We do have things like a regional memory clinic, which is actually provincially recognized, actually nationally recognized as a model, which is actually made here in KW. The Research Institute for Aging up in with the Schlegels is the home of that innovation, and I think it's a source of pride. And that type of approach to the frail elderly folks is something which, again, we have tied together hospitals, long-term care, primary care, community care, palliative care, and so on together. There's a bunch of things that we've done together. I wear multiple hats. So, with regards to disclosure, I'm the chair and lead physician of the Center for Family Medicine, which is the largest family health team in the region. I am a director for McMaster to help the medical school. I am also the clinical lead for the LIN for this region. So just in events of disclosure, there are a number of things that we have done trying to tie these things together. So it's not like nothing has been done, but this is continuation and I suppose a forcing together of many sectors. We have many signatories on it. In fact, you would say every major healthcare institution in this region has signed on. There are 31 signatories to this, including the 2 hospitals, all the primary care teams, long-term care. I've mentioned the Research Institute for Aging and the Schlegel organization, many mental health and addictions agencies, many other community agencies. The University of Waterloo is also signatory of this, and we have actually more than 33 letters. We have many letters of support for this, so a very broad representation in this area. So I invite any questions you may have of this happening.
Well, thank you, Dr. Joe, for what you do in the community, and thanks for those. The signatories list is like a who's who of all the organizations that are beloved within our community. So it's really good to see that that's the strength of it, the grassroots nature, and it's just this. We really want to have council here is the entire structure and how large this is and how much work there is to do. So with that, I'll turn over to questions of council, and Councillor Hanmer. Is it an educated question? I bet you.
It will be. Through you, Mayor, Dr. Joe, Dr. Lee, thank you very much for the presentation tonight. And I think also I'll echo the Mayor's comments. Thank you for the leadership you've shown over the number of years. You're very humble in all the things that you've done. And I truly believe that primary care would not be where it is today without the leadership you and your team have shown. So thank you for that. I do think we're in really good hands with this proposal going in. I do have a question, though, with 158 that have been submitted and a plan to roll out 30 to 50 teams. You never know, they might roll them all out at the same time, but saying that they're going to do it in a staged approach, and let's say we're not part of step 1, what things can we expect will continue to to continue the direction for coordinated care in this area?
Yes, thanks, Sandra. Well, first, we don't know how the ministry will decide. My understanding from many meetings and provincial level meetings is that the province has likely chosen 5 to 10 sites that they for various reasons will just approve in the first wave. And that won't be KW4. And we were not even aiming for that. We want to be in the first 30 or so, because I'll just be very frank with the audience that I think if we don't do this, this region will be left in the dust with regards to funding and healthcare for the citizens of this area. So I'm deeply concerned if we are not successful with this. So there's a large motivation. The motivation is beyond this application. There has been a lot of activities and actually coming together on many initiatives here. The 31 signatories have actually agreed that regardless of what the province says, we will work together. Because the vision is actually correct, to work together better for the people that we serve. And that's very hard to argue against. And we should do that, whether we are going through this process or not. And so we have a meeting tomorrow to try to continue making plans. And I truly think that one way or another, this region will be very hard for the province to ignore in doing something for it. And so with so many applicants, I mean, it was predicted that there would be a lot of applications. We're not particularly afraid. In fact, Ron Gagnon, who's, as you know, the presidency of Grand River Hospital, he told to me, he said, Joe, I'm afraid our application is too strong. I don't want that to rush things too much either. So I think we're fine where we're at.
Thank you. I would agree with that. I think this area has a very strong reputation of just moving on with things. And so I can see the groups working together, and I'm hopeful that we can continue moving in that direction. It'd be nice to be part of the first 10, but it also may be better to be as you've said, within the first 30, because they can work out the bumps with the others. So again, thank you for your leadership in this area.
Thank you.
Further questions to the delegate? Seeing none, thank you for that 10-minute lecture on changes in healthcare throughout Ontario affecting our citizens. It was very informative, and good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. Moving into section 11, our formal public meetings, and the first one is with Rita. So let's see. This is a formal public meeting to consider item 11A, zoning bylaw amendment Z 1709, Maison Canada Holdings Limited for 185 King Street North. Any persons who want further notices of application, including the passage of any bylaw, should sign the appropriate register in the binder located on the desk at the rear of council chambers. If there is more than one binder like there is tonight, please make sure you are signing the appropriate one. Will the clerk please advise council of the method used to give notice of the meeting and the dates notice was given?
Notice was advertised in the Waterloo Chronicle 2019 and mailed or emailed on June 4th, 2019 to all property owners within 120 meters of the subject property, to public agencies, to all persons who signed in or spoke at the informal public meeting held on June 12th, 2017, and to all persons who requested further notice.
The planner, Rita Zelak, will now give a brief overview of the application. Welcome, Rita.
Thank you very much, Mayor Jaworski. Members of council, ladies and gentlemen, this is a formal public meeting for 185 King Street North, zoning bylaw amendment Z 1709. The application was submitted by Maison Canada Holdings, represented here tonight by Steve Jefferson of K-Smart Associates. The subject site is located on the southwest corner of Bricker Avenue and King Street North, located across the street from Wilfrid Laurier University. The site is well served by public transit and is located within about a 15-minute walk of the Waterloo Park LRT station. This is a picture of the existing 11-story, 37-unit apartment building located on the subject site. The applicant's proposal is to convert a portion of the existing ground floor amenity area within this building to a restaurant-type use. This is a conceptual partial first floor plan submitted by the applicant. The proposed restaurant area is shown for you in orange, while the proposed amenity area is shown for you in blue. To accommodate the restaurant use, the applicant is requesting to reduce both the residential and the commercial parking rates on the subject site. The official plan designates the subject site mixed-use, high-density residential, which allows for mixed-use buildings with ancillary commercial uses, including restaurants. In terms of zoning bylaw 2018-50, also known as the new citywide zoning bylaw, the subject site is zone change application, or ZC. The intent of the ZC zone is to ensure that the zoning regulations applicable on the lands on the day before the effective date of the new zoning bylaw continue to apply. As you can see, the land surrounding the subject site, containing apartment buildings over here and here, have been zoned residential mixed use 81 or RMU 81 within the new zoning bylaw. Prior to the new zoning bylaw being approved by council, the subject site was zoned multiple residence 25 or MR 25 within bylaw 1108, which permits apartment buildings but does not permit any ancillary uses. The zoning bylaw amendment, as recommended by staff, is summarized on this slide. Staff is recommending to rezone the subject site within bylaw 1108 from MR 25 to MR 25 with site-specific provisions, and to rezone the subject site within bylaw 2018-50 from ZC to RMU 81 with site-specific provisions. This table breaks down the site-specific provisions as recommended by staff. They're shown in purple for you, while the MR 25 zone requirements and the RMU 81 zone requirements are shown in gray. Staff is recommending that a cafe, restaurant, a takeout restaurant use be permitted as ancillary uses within the MR25 zone. The restaurant parking rate to be reduced to 2.7 spaces per 100 square meters as permitted by the RMU 81 zone. That the residential parking rate be reduced to 0.83 spaces per unit, and that a visitor parking rate be introduced to the MR25 zone, again to follow suit with the requirements of the RMU 81 zone. Staff is also recommending that a parking space width of 2.8 meters be permitted when a parking space is abutting either a wall or a column. This is to recognize existing conditions on the site. And also that there be no loading spaces required for the restaurant space, following suit with the RMU 81 zone requirements. In addition, staff is recommending that the restaurant space be limited to 74 square meters in size, and that a minimum 130 square meter amenity area be provided within the existing building. In conclusion, staff is recommending that Council approve zoning bylaw amendment Z1709 for 185 King Street North in accordance with Section 7 of the staff report. That concludes my presentation. If there are any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Thank you for the details, Rita. I know Councillor Henry has a question.
Sure.
More just for confirmation, Rita. Can you go back 2 slides? So you mentioned here that staff is recommending as part of the zoning bylaw amendment that a minimum of 130 square meter amenity area be provided.
Correct.
Can you go over briefly what was required and at the time of original construction of this building in terms of amenity area? Because I know that was an item we talked about at the informal.
Sure. So at the time when the applicant submitted the building permit, there were no zoning requirements for amenity area within this building, but there was 233 square meters of area provided within this building. There was no zoning requirement for it, though. Okay, does that help?
Yeah. So staff is through this, recommending that amenity areas be required under zoning, not just
Exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas right now it wouldn't be required at all.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bonagor, Councillor Bodley then.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. I'm just curious with on this slide, the fact that there are no loading spaces. What are the plans and provisions for deliveries, cleaning services, all the other kind of truck activity that would be involved in running even a small establishment?
Sure. So this space the proposed space is quite small. I don't know if you've been to Quick Sandwiches. It's about half the size of that space. So I would imagine that the parking spaces allocated to the restaurant use would be used to do the deliveries, and perhaps they would be done outside of business hours to ensure that those spaces are available for residents, for anybody visiting, I mean.
So does that mean that can we be assured that we wouldn't be seeing cars stopped on King, cars stopped on Bricker to allow for quick deliveries?
It's not something that I can guarantee for you. It's really based on the operation of the business and how they choose to operate. That's just would be the case with any business, I would think.
Thank you, and thank you for the special shout out to beautiful businesses in Uptown Waterloo on Willis Way.
Sure.
Councillor Bodley.
Through Mayor Jaworski, this is maybe a follow-up to both of those. So in the RMU 81 zone, if this was a new building,
Yes.
what would we be requiring for amenity space?
If it was a new building, there would be a requirement. It would be, I think, 3 square meters for the first bedroom within each unit, and then an additional 2 square meters for any additional bedrooms within those units. So in total, there would be 400 square meters of amenity area required if this was a new building. The RMU, so the new zoning bylaw, because it's an existing building, wouldn't require any amenity space in here.
Yep, understood. Just trying to get some context of what we're enforcing on them. And then under RMU 81, I wonder if maybe, just having not been involved in the discussions as a new counselor, perhaps could you expand on why in the new zoning bylaw under RMU 81 we would not be requiring a loading space?
I would suspect, I wasn't involved in the creation of that particular zoning requirement, but I suspect that it has to do with the area requirement. So if you look at the requirements within the new zoning bylaw, any non-residential space within a building that is less than 250 square meters in size would not require a loading space. And I imagine it has to do with the size. It's just small enough in size to be able to accommodate a regular vehicle coming in and using a regular space to do the deliveries.
And I'll look to Mr. Cotter for further information.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, to Councillor Bodley. Following up on what Rita said, it's essentially an attempt to try and facilitate mixed-use development with some of our intensification projects that currently exist. Many of these existing buildings have been constructed that have the capability of having some mixed use, but based on their parking and other configurations under the old zoning, aren't necessarily set up for all of the provisions. So the zoning bylaw was drafted to allow minor amounts of commercial space to be added to some of these buildings without the requirement for traditional larger loading spaces. It's the expectation that the parking spaces that are provided on site would be sufficient to accommodate cube vans, delivery vans, the smaller vehicles that would traditionally service many of the needs of these smaller businesses.
Great. Thank you. Next up, Councillor Hanmer, please.
Thank you through you, Mayor Jaworski. Rita, thank you for the overview. My question is really related to, again, being a bit of a new counselor here and the informal meeting happening prior to us being. So my question is, to your satisfaction, have all the issues or concerns raised during the informal meeting been addressed in the proposal that we're seeing tonight?
Yes, as the recommendation was put forward by staff with the recommendation to limit the size of the restaurant space and require the amenity area to be a minimum, like that the applicant provide a minimum amenity area within the building. I am satisfied that all the issues have been and concerns have been satisfied.
Great, thank you.
Okay, seeing no further questions, Rita, thank you very much. I want to ask any registered delegations to come forward, of which there is one, and it's Steve Jefferson of K Smart Associates. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you, Mayor Jaworski, members of council. Yes, my name is Steve Jefferson. I'm a planner with K Smart Associates in Kitchener. I'm here this evening on behalf of our client, Maison Canada Holdings Limited. The owner is also represented at this meeting by Mr. Boris Faraborzi in the back row. The building is located at 185 King Street North at Bricker Avenue. The amendment application has been processed by the City of Waterloo and presented at this formal public meeting this evening. I'd like to thank Rita Cieslock for the work she's put into this, and we've worked with her through the issues and put a lot of thought into the regulations that she has proposed. As applied for, the request is to add a restaurant as an ancillary use on the main floor of the apartment building within the residence amenity space. As shown in the figure in the presentation, there is room on the main floor that was designated as an amenity space when originally built. There are 3 entrances to this amenity space, including 1 set of doors to the outside sidewalk and 2 internal entrances. 1 internal entrance has a lift to provide accessible entry into the room. After occupancy by the building residents, the owner obtained feedback on how the students would like the amenity space to be built out. The preference was to create a social meeting space with booths and seating where the students can meet with friends and roommates. In addition to the meeting space, the residents also asked if a cafe or restaurant type of service could be included in the main floor area. The residents proposed the idea of the food service so they could have access to healthier food and quick breakfasts. Residents can also be part-time employees of the food service when built. At the time of this application, a zone change was required to add the restaurant use as a permitted activity for this property. The amenity area has been built out in approximately 2/3 of the area with tables and booth-style seating. It does serve as a place where students can work together individually on school assignments, and also as a general place for friends to gather. It is well used by the residents. The design concept for a food service area to be included within the amenity space can be compared to a counter within a mall food court with set hours of operation. Customers can eat in or take away the food. A roll-down type shutter would be used for times outside of hours of operation. In response to earlier questions about the food service, we can contrast this building to other recent student apartment buildings within main floor commercial spaces. There are a number of new student apartment buildings with leasable commercial space on the main floor to serve the residents in the building and citizens in the immediate vicinity. For example, a building on Balsam Street has multiple leasable units, including 2 restaurants. Other newer buildings on Hemlock, Spruce, and Hickory Streets also have restaurants in separate leasable units, separate from the residential use. This is not the model being proposed in this zone change application. Many of these other buildings have multiple commercial units available for lease to outside operators. Those buildings were designed and built with this intent of providing leasable space. The food service at 185 King Street will not be a separate business space leased to or operated by a third party. The space will be constructed and operated by the building owner as a complementary service for residents within the amenity space. A comparison could be made to a cafeteria in a secondary school which provides food and beverages to students during business hours. Outside of those business hours, the food counter is not accessible, but the room can still be used. Since the food service will be controlled by the building owner, it is possible to maintain access to the rest of the amenity space with no obligation for users to purchase any goods or services. The primary use in this amenity space is the social meeting and lounge function as determined in consultation between the owner and the residents. The food service is a secondary use to complement the room, and which is provided by the building owner within the required amenity space in response to resident needs. Under the new bylaw, a restaurant is a permitted use. Clarification of the parking requirements has been included in the draft amending bylaws, which reflects the existing number of parking spaces on site. Since the building was occupied, there have been a range of 7 to 11 unused parking spaces in the building, which can be reallocated for visitors and the restaurant use. The spaces are at street level and would be recognized in an amendment to the existing site plan. We have worked with city planning staff to assess the previous and new comprehensive zoning bylaws, and I do support the proposed site-specific provisions within the amending bylaws. My opinion of this application is consistent with the conclusions of city staff, namely that the proposal is consistent with the 2014 provincial policy statement, conforms to the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, conforms to the policies of the regional official plan, and conforms to the City of Waterloo official plan. Thank you for your consideration of this application. I'm available to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jefferson. Any questions for Steve? Councillor Bodley, Councillor Bonagor, Councillor Vasek, Councillor Veith. A few questions.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. I'm curious, does the current amenity space, do the building allow residents to consume alcohol in that amenity space currently? And is there any thought that if we approve the restaurant use that a liquor license would be pursued to dispense drinks in the lobby?
To my knowledge, the alcohol use is not allowed at this time, and there's been no talk of obtaining a license. I could just confirm that with, that is correct.
Councillor Bonagor, then Vasek and Veith.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, first of all, I want to thank you for going to the students and finding out what they wanted. So that's great. Students often don't feel heard. So thank you for letting some students feel heard. I will ask you the same question I asked of the planning department. So can you give some kind of assurances that the parking lot that you have will be sufficient for this and that loading won't be happening on side streets?
Yes.
Or on King Street, main streets as well, yes, not just side streets, main streets as well.
Okay, through you, Mayor Jaworski. Yes, it is possible for small delivery vans, vehicles to be able to come in. There is an entrance off of Bricker Avenue into the parking. There is underground parking for the tenants, but at the street level, there are a number of spaces, so it would be possible for a vehicle to drive straight in and have a parking spot. So we could review that comment with city staff at the site plan amendment stage if it's necessary to clarify that.
I appreciate that, thank you.
And I would think that once the King Street Streetscape Stage 3 gets up there and there's bike lanes and we'll probably have to protect them go in, there will be no stopping on King Street anymore. Councillor Vasek, then Veith.
Thanks through you, Mayor. Thanks for the background info. How many students were involved? How many did you talk to?
The building owner did the survey. I'd have to pull out that, but there was at least 80 responses approximately. There was I was impressed with the number of people that filled out and signed the paperwork on what they would like to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good number. And how did it come about? Like, it sounds great. Like, students want some food and a common area to sit and study, but they have that already. So, I guess I'm just curious how this came about. Is it because you wanted to open a restaurant and you thought, what a great spot, I have it here, let's ask for it? Did you start hearing from it from residents? What was the catalyst?
Well, as a former student who spent time living in residences and student apartments in town, there's the dynamic of being in your apartment with your roommates. Not all of those units necessarily have a lot of extra space to be able to sit down and just hang out. And the way a lot of the newer buildings are, there is a premium on that space to socialize and just to get out of your apartment. Go down into the main floor of the building. Here are 2 photos of the seating which is in there right now. So it's designed to be able to have small groups, larger groups to sit around there. There may be TVs installed eventually for extra entertainment value as well. But with the space in there, in consultation with the city building department, my client has gone through the code requirements and he's quite confident that it's going to be possible to make sure we meet accessibility requirements, washroom requirements, and fire separation, and all those types of details that are going to be the nitty-gritty once it comes to the building permit stage.
That's all totally great. I'm just curious because you've talked to so many students. So I was curious if this initiative came from you as the owner or who you're representing, or if it came from the students themselves. I'm just generally curious about what are students asking for, or are they being told like, oh, we're thinking about putting a restaurant here. Is that something you'd like?
Yeah.
Just curious.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Jaworski, if I could just quickly turn to my client again. This file has been around for a few years, so if Boris, would you like to just address that briefly?
Boris Fariborzi, in response to your question, it was a document signed by the tenants requesting to have a place that they can sit down and have a coffee and light food. That request and recommendation came to the students.
Next up, Councillor Veith.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. Thank you for coming, Mr. Jefferson, because that made things much more clear for me. And I was concerned too about the loading, and I sent those questions to Rita over the weekend. So anyway, it sounds like this is something that the residents want and need. So anyway, again, thank you for coming and making that more clear for probably all of us.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you. I had a question spawned by Councillor Bodley's interest in a liquor license, which made me think about other dates like March 17th. I'm just wondering, with the access of public restaurant, public washrooms, is there a chance you're actually going to be closed on March 17th every year?
Based on my client's experience in the neighborhood, I would not be surprised if he took a management decision to restrict access to his building on
That'd be
those
a good
days.
thing that
Yes.
day. Couldn't hurt. Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Where do we go here? Is there anyone else present here tonight who wishes to speak to this application? Seeing none. If there are no more delegations, this formal public meeting is concluded and the application is now open to council for a motion and debate. Councillor Bonigar.
So I'm happy to move the motion. So having considered all written and oral submissions from the public and stakeholders and considered the professional opinions of planning staff, I move that council approves zoning bylaw amendment Z1709 for 185 King Street North in accordance with section 7, the recommendations of IPPW 2019-042, for the reasons specified in section 6, the conclusions of the report.
Seconded by Councillor Veith. Any discussion? All those in favor? It's all of us. Thank you. Thank you, Rita. Item B. This is a formal public meeting to consider item 11B, zoning bylaw amendment application Z1901, general amendments to zoning bylaw numbers 1108, 1418, and 2018-050. Any persons who want further notice of this application, including the passage of any bylaw, should sign the appropriate register in the binder located at the desk at the rear of council chambers where there is more than one. Will the clerk please advise council of the method used to give notice of the meeting and the dates notice was given?
Notice is advertised in the KW Record on May 31st, 2019, in the Waterloo Chronicle on June 6, 2019, and mailed or emailed on June 4th, 2019, to all properties within 120 meters of subject property, to public agencies, to all persons who signed in or spoke at the informal public meeting held on March 7, 2019, and to all persons who requested further notice.
Thank you. There's no presentation. Does anyone have any questions for the planner, Dominic Simpson? Councillor Henry.
Thank you, Mayor. Dominic, just one question on this one. On the outdoor patios piece, I know there's a lot of interest in that, and we've received a lot of letters of support from that from the community. I was just wondering if there were any, if we were aware of any existing patios that would become legal non-conforming as a result of adopting this this bylaw provision. And if so, have we let those folks know?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, to my knowledge right now, there would be the Hoother one is probably something that would come into question about legal non-conforming use. But in terms of the rest of the uptown area, I don't believe there are any proposed at this time. And we have not let those business owners know.
For further clarity, this is about outdoor rooftop patios, correct? And how many are, oh, Joel, let's see.
Through Mayor Jaworski to Councillor Henry. To staff's knowledge, there's no rooftop patios within the city of Waterloo, so we don't believe any spaces are forming through these regulations. As it stands today, the current bylaws don't permit rooftop patios in our opinion, and so the proposals are to permit rooftop patios subject to a definition and various performance standards as set out in staff's recommendation.
Further questions? Councillor Bonigar. Pardon me? Sure, feel free. Okay. It's a formal meeting, you can say what you want.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. I was just saying this is more of a comment than specifically a question. As Councillor Henry noted.
Although we're not debating at this point, just for clarity's, but.
Okay, for clarity. No, I'll wait until it's later on. All good.
Sure. Any questions further of the planner? Councillor Vasic.
Thanks through you, Mayor. Thanks for answering my 800 questions before the actual meeting, Dominic. Very much appreciated. Just about the electrical vehicles. So I love that the idea is to put it in when 80% is what it says here, right? Like that the goal is to put 80% in a new parking lot in new developments. Yes. so that they can actually put the charging stations in the future. And the 80% is so because we're going to have less reliance on gas automobiles, but would it be like a huge cost more to just add in the extra 20%? Like why 80%? Why not 80%, 100% if we're already under there or they're already under there?
That's through you, Mayor Jaworski. That's definitely a fair point. I feel that staff's position with the 80% was ambitious as it is for the time being, but with that we wanted to provide a number that showed that we were eager about climate change and proposing zoning regulations that support reduction in climate change. And so that those spaces, as I think I might have indicated in the email, won't be restricted to standard vehicles. It's just so that they're ready as the demand increases for electrical vehicle parking spaces, that those parking spaces as they exist or as they're built can easily be retrofitted to support electric vehicle charging stations. Does that hopefully answer your question?
Yes, it definitely answers one of my questions. And then I guess the other one is like, if 80% is ambitious, that's great. But like, why not 100%? How much does it cost per space, I guess? Like, what would the pushback be to say we want all of them done? I just don't know what the pushback would be.
And I saw Joel had his hand up earlier, missed him. Go ahead, Mr. Cotter.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, to Councillor Vasek. The 80% is driven from the Ontario Building Code. So the Ontario Building Code at this point in time requires an 80% vehicle-ready provision for certain types of land uses. What we did through the zoning bylaws expand that range of land uses to include apartments. So we're trying to line up with the requirements to the best of our ability with the Ontario Building Code, but going a little bit further and now requiring structured parking for residential buildings to be included in that mix. So the intention is to line the zoning bylaw up as closely as possible with the Ontario Building Code. So that's the objective. And then there's separate regulations for surface parking spaces that are also based on best practices that were established through a review when we did the comprehensive bylaw on places like California and other locations that have a more progressive electric vehicle charging requirements in their zoning bylaws.
Questions? Councillor Bodley and Bonnegar, sorry. I saw you first. You had your, ready to go? Good, go ahead.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. So understanding that the previous council did an exceptional amount of work to get to this point, I'm not really here to relitigate any of the previous conversations, but I am going to ask a couple of questions. So the piece on rooftop patios, the way I'm reading it is that we are not going to allow music on rooftop patios, period. Is that how I'm reading it?
Yeah, so through you, Mayor Jaworski, the intent with that provision in the proposed rooftop patio regulations is that we don't have excessively loud music on these patios. The intent with that is the land use compatibility issues and the concerns raised from residents about noise from these businesses, that we wanted to add that in so that they can still proceed as a restaurant or a cafe patio, but not be used as, I guess, an extension of a nightlife or club of that sort.
So I guess I'm curious if that's maybe going a little bit too far. We're already restricting it to abutting residential neighborhoods. So if it's not in a residential neighborhood, if it's right on King Street, if McCabe's wants to put a rooftop patio above their building on King Street, we're also going to prevent them from playing music. Seems a little harsh for me, given that on their main floor patio, they're going to open up their garage door and be able to play music from there. So it seems a little harsh to me, but I'll I'll let the rest of council determine whether that's, whether I'm offside or not. But second question was around the cannabis part of the legislation there. So maybe just get a little bit of clarity, understanding that maybe we're a long time away from actually getting a cannabis store in the city of Waterloo. But would we have an allowance for perhaps the gentleman who was in here earlier with his building to allow within an RMU building to have a cannabis store in the main floor of, say, a student apartment building? Is that something you foresee through this?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, yes, that's definitely possible if the building or the zoning allows for what we proposed, a drugstore, variety store, or retail store, then a cannabis dispensary would be permitted in those locations.
Very good. And if I may, on my last question there, Mayor Jaworski. So this is the part where I'm not really interested in relitigating. I just want to make the comment. And maybe hear a little bit back of why the decision was made in this regard is around the containerized housing units not being allowed, just because I saw that there was a little bit in there about that. So understanding that I'm not necessarily here advocating for a proliferation of containerized housing units throughout the city, but I'm curious as to why we're being so restrictive as to not allow them at all.
If I may, I could direct this to Joel, because I think that was drafted before my time.
Mr. Containerized Houses, Joel.
Through Mayor Jaworski to Councillor Bodley, it was a discussion point that was raised early on in the comprehensive zoning bylaw around the potential for container housings to be added into the backyards for student housing purposes. So it was an issue around, how to create good quality living space for the residents of the community. And the intention in the bylaw is to not permit them. If someone wants to advance that particular use, they could go through a process through council to allow for the container type housing. There is, I think, one provider in Guelph that does a version of this type of housing, so it's not a new concept, but it's not common to Waterloo. And the concerns around the students was really where, in the conversation, the issue kind of drove home for us. We took a very maybe cautious approach in that regard.
Yeah, very fair, and hadn't really contemplated the student element of that, so that's probably quite relevant for our municipality. But I would like to just maybe ensure that this isn't entirely on the back burner forever, that maybe we could bring this back for a conversation in the future. Thank you.
Everything with proper use, I think that's the key thing here, and sometimes you have to take a conservative approach. Councillor Bonnegar.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Jaworski. Councillor Vasik's question reminded me that I did have a question regarding the electric vehicle parking spaces. I'm just curious, you're setting like 80% targets for residential parking lots for provision of e-parking. And I'm just wondering, for the non-residential surface parking spaces, the minimums there seem pretty low. Why is that? Is there a really plain reason behind that I'm just not seeing?
Okay, we'll go with Joel.
Through Mayor Jaworski to Councillor Bonnegar. The rates that are set out in the bylaw were driven by best practice review. So it was driven by working with the City of Kitchener on kind of the standards that they were looking to establish, which mostly referenced back to California and certain places in the United States that have regulations. It's certainly something that council can revisit or adjust if there's a increasing demand. It's a bit of a balance of pushing back, but I will note that within this community there seems to be a strong desire for electric vehicle charging, and even though we're setting a minimum standard in the bylaw, I think you're starting to see more streets, for example, in the municipality being incorporating some electric vehicle charging, and you'll see more and more commercial. It's really for large developments, and the other factor is we're not going to see too much more large commercial developments within the city of Waterloo, given our land supply and constraints. So what you'll see is more additions to Conestoga Mall and other facilities, adding these types of stations in as part of their normal practice.
Because I mean, that's one thing I would like to see, because the one thing that by having some electric vehicle parking spaces in commercial lots, it gives capacity for commercial operations to have essentially an e-fleet car, so that hopefully workers can commute to work and there is an e-vehicle on premises for use for meetings and things like that. So I'm happy to leave things as they are, but that's a conversation that I would hope that those conversations do happen with developers with the remaining lands that we have.
Just to follow up, Councillor, or Mayor Jaworski through to Councillor Bonagor, this is part one of our general amendment, so we're happy to take that back as part of our part two review and have a little deeper look, if you will.
And did you know we have 14 30-ton LRVs, electric vehicles, largest ones running around town now? Very good. Good way to get around. Seeing no further questions from council, we don't have any registered delegations. Is there anyone here present tonight who wishes to speak to this application? Welcome, Michael. Please provide your name, municipality of residence for the record.
My name is Michael Lerner. I'm a lawyer in London with Lerners, and I'm here to represent the Di Battista Group that has licensed premises in Guelph, Kitchener, Waterloo, London, and Cambridge. I'm here to speak to the patio provisions in the proposed bylaw. If I might say that the recommendations, there are, I believe, 8 in number. We have no objection to 5 of 8, and in particular, item A, which outdoor patios shall be prohibited except in zone which permits a restaurant, cafe, or bake shop. The item number C, that the patio not extend the building limits. Number D, we have no problem with number D, nor do we have any problem with item G. The ones that I wish to focus and concentrate on this evening are in particular item, I'll do the easy one first in light of a question that's already been asked.
And for those following along, we're on page 122 and 123 of our package.
So item 8 says outdoor rooftop patios shall not contain electric music/sound equipment and shall not be used as a dance floor or for live music or other forms of entertainment. My client is proposing that the provisions with relating to electronic music and sound equipment to be deleted, so the prohibition only applies to live music or other forms of live entertainment and a dance floor. That is, the intention is, if the bylaw permits to have what is referred to as ambient music, background music, those of us who can remember elevator music as the sort of thing, and it would be, in all likelihood, somewhat less in decibels than normal speech that occurs. That particular item can be dealt with, first of all, by the zoning bylaw, which applies. And in the event that there is a formal complaint with regard to electronic music sound equipment, there is also the remedy to lodge a complaint with the Alcohol Gaming Commission. And there are precedents where, in fact, licenses have either been suspended or revoked for a period of time because the licensed premises do not comply with the local noise bylaw provision. I might say that of all the licensed establishments my client has in Waterloo, I have checked with the bylaw enforcement office, and there have been no noise complaints at all until very recently, which may be related, I'm not sure, to a decision of the AGCO rendered on June 4th that was granted the issuance of a license. Item number E refers to a limit of 50 square meters per building. Using the usual capacity, that would be a capacity of not more than 40 patrons. A recent application, again, that I was involved in, the initial application was for 220. capacity. When the matter came before the commission, there were some discussions between my client and the objectors. That number was subsequently reduced to, I believe, 110, and that was the number that was approved by the Alcohol and Gaming Commission. So if it is a capacity issue, it can be dealt with again by the Alcohol and Gaming Commission that can impose a condition on the license that the capacity not exceed a certain number. And of course, not only the objectors, but the municipality has the ability to appear for that commission and make its own submission. The third and final concern that my client wishes to discuss is that the outdoor rooftop patios in number B prohibited within 40 meters of a low-rise residential lot line. I don't know where the number 40 came from, but as something that would be acceptable to my client if that number was reduced to 25. I can tell you that there are at least there are 2 licensed premises in London that are immediately adjacent to residential units, both low-rise and high-rise. Again, there have been absolutely no complaints in the last 2 years, and I attribute that to the fact that the proposed glass or whatever it is barrier around the perimeter is really a suppressor of noise and minimizes the disruption and enhances the compatibility between the proposed use and the existing neighborhood. Even though I come from a few miles down the road, this municipality is recognized as being one of the most progressive and vibrant, certainly in this part of Ontario. I suggest to you that the designation of the area as an entertainment district makes this proposed use somewhat compatible. I recognize that immediately adjacent to the proposed property there may be a residential unit that has to be protected, and the buffer that's being proposed, both the distance of 25 meters and the mandatory perimeter fencing or boundary or whatever you wish to call it, has been successful elsewhere in the past, and I have no doubt that will be successful if the bylaw is amended accordingly. Those are my submissions. I might just say that I wasn't sure what item number F meant, and I intended to ask if I could get an explanation. I think I'm in agreement, but not knowing exactly what it means, I'd like to confirm that.
Thank you, Michael. We will find out. And I would think, just to comment on the entertainment district, I think that's a self-proclaimed one, or one used by police, not by the city of Waterloo. I don't think that's our entertainment district. Happens to be one, but it's not through choice. Questions of the delegate? Councillor Henry?
Just the one. I just wanted to clarify. I understand your presentation, I think, very well, but I just wanted to clarify one point you made early on about your client having some venues in Waterloo with which they took a look. So I just wanted to make sure I heard you correctly. Are you saying that your client currently has outdoor rooftop patios in Waterloo?
No, sir.
Okay. I thought I'd heard something different, so I appreciate the clarification.
No, there currently are no rooftop patios, certainly under the control of my client.
Okay.
I would also like to thank Mr. Simpson for the cooperation that he has provided on a regular basis, both with him and Mr. Ross. And they, in my view, have gone out of their way to make sure that physical dislocation by kilometers was not a deterrent to our ability to be fully informed of the application.
Thank you, Michael. I have some questions of staff, but first up, we still have Councillor Vasek and Councillor Bodley with questions for the delegate.
Thanks through you, Mayor. I'm just curious, what do they do? There's been no calls to bylaw complaining of noise in London, right?
Yes, there is a noise bylaw in London.
Yeah, but you were saying that there haven't been any complaints.
No complaints.
Right.
None.
So do they take any proactive measures at their council to do and are there even any mechanisms? This might also be both a question for you and staff, but curious what London does around any pop-ins to ask about noise, like a little noise study. I'm learning lots about noise this week, and it sounds like we could possibly be proactive to go in and check on the patios or the rooftop patios to see if they are being too noisy, like if they reach a certain decibel or something?
Well, first of all, the bylaw enforcement officer, under the bylaw, there is a decibel limit. The AGCO does not like decibel limits. They don't want their inspectors walking around whatever it takes to determine decibels, and they rely upon that limit as binding them with regard to the amount of noise that may emanate from a particular location. I might also say that the provisions under the Alcohol and Gaming Commission extend beyond the actual premises, and there have been a number of instances where conduct on the outside, beyond the premises, on the streets and alleys and laneways, have resulted in the suspension of a license until there is compliance with the regular provisions of the noise bylaw.
Thanks for that. I think probably my question wasn't totally clear. I'm just curious if they use proactive measures to address the noise versus reactive. So get a call, go out and look into it, or do they do anything proactive in London in terms of noise?
Yeah, well, the licensees that I'm familiar with are regularly monitoring what goes on the patio. They are very concerned about the decibel limit and have actually a control so it cannot go beyond a certain limit that ensures that somebody doesn't walk by and turn up the sound beyond what's permitted by the bylaw.
Okay, and to Councillor Bodley, please.
Thank you, through Mayor Jaworski. I'm just curious if you could share with me a little bit, or if you have shared with staff, and maybe this morphs into a staff question, the AGCO discussion that you were referencing about 110 square meters for an appropriate outdoor patio space. Could you elaborate maybe on that? And is that a binding decision? It's elaborate?
It's a binding decision to the extent that the premises are only licensed to that capacity. That came from a compromise where the initial application was for 220. Mr. Ross was present at the hearing, took no part in the hearing, but monitored what was going on, and he will know that, and I'm sure tell you that there was conversation, negotiations to reduce the numbers, something that would be hopefully compatible with the desire of the neighbors, and that resulted in the capacity being reduced. So when you impose a 20% of the total floor unit, that conflicts to some extent with the AGCO's ability to limit capacity. And I think that if there is some concern that the capacity being applied for is excessive or ought not to be permitted, there is an ability in either the objectors or the municipality to ask for a reduction.
Oh, sorry, yep. Welcome to the podium, Mr. Ross.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just to address the issue of what was before the AGCO and its impact on zoning. That decision is always, as is every liquor license decision, it's always subject to the applicable zoning bylaws of the municipality. So just because the AGCO has said, hey, you're okay with 110 people, what Mr. Lerner, I believe, is saying is that at the square footage limit proposed in the bylaw, they would never get to that. That's not really our concern. However, it is within council's discretion to make whatever tweaks to the zoning bylaw that's before them tonight, but certainly the liquor license decision, the board member went to great lengths, and I know some members of the committee or of the community are here as well. The board member went to great lengths to explain that what her decision was separate from zoning decision. So zoning is with this forum tonight.
Thank you. And while Mr. Lerner's still here, I have a question of staff just on clarity on item F, which was requested for. Could somebody interpret that for us?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Jaworski, that line was just to clarify that we don't want the entire rooftop patio to be covered with a roof, and that provision states that only 20% of said rooftop patio should be covered, and at least two sides of that should be open. So we don't want, the intention with that is that the whole rooftop patio doesn't become enclosed and essentially become like another story in a way. We still want it to be open to the air, and I guess envision those roofed areas to be for like a bar or the cash area, that sort of thing.
Okay.
I now understand, and I can advise council that my client has no intention of enclosing or covering the entire premises. And once, I can tell you, once it's permitted an extension or partial covering, all the smoking bylaws then apply. And so, there's a provision not only for patios, but the enclosed area, so there'll be no permitted smoking at all whatsoever.
Okay. So to recap, three concerns are to allow ambient music larger than 50 square meters, and 40 meters from the lot line is too tight in your opinion?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Seeing, Councillor Bonnegar, please.
I have a question for staff, but it stems from one of the delegates' points. So,
are we done with the delegate? Or?
oh, yeah. Well, unless he wants to hear, well, he'll be in the crowd to hear the answer, I suppose.
Okay, go ahead.
It's just with that request to consider ambient background music. How would that be policed? How do you set that limit?
I don't know who wants to try the policing aspect.
Well, I might suggest that the provision, which I've spent some time looking at, provide for or permit electronic music, et cetera, not to exceed the noise bylaw that enforce at the particular time. That would be the easiest way to do it.
Okay, I'm going to look to Commissioner Dykstra.
Yeah, through the mayor to the councillor, the noise bylaw would be the tool and the vehicle and the means to do that through municipal enforcement.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any further delegations? Seeing none. If there are no more delegations, this formal public meeting is concluded and the application is now open to council for a motion and debate. Look at all those hands go. Councillor Vasek. Oh, hold on. Oh, okay. Councillor Bonnegar.
So I was going to move the motion that we and open it to debate.
Okay. Moved by Councillor Bonnegar, second by Councillor Bodley. No. Okay. Second by Councillor Henry. Okay, we got Councillor Henry there. Do you want to make comments first? Comments? Okay.
Where am I at? So I am moving that zoning bylaw amendment. Oh, hang on. Oh, I didn't have the right one. Okay. Sorry. I'm catching up. Making sure I've got the right one open. Yes. Having considered all written and oral submissions from the public and stakeholders and considered the professional opinions of planning staff, Council approves zoning bylaw amendment Z1901, City of Waterloo zoning bylaw general amendments in accordance with the recommendations outlined in Appendix A of Report IPPW 2019-046.
Any commentary? We're open to Councillor Henry. Councillor Bodley. You're the only one who wants to talk right now.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, I mean, I think the intention of this, having again not been through the original discussions around the comprehensive zoning bylaw, I think the intention of this is to recognize an oversight and trying to prohibit rooftop patios adjacent to residential neighborhood. And I have received, and as many of us have received, a lot of communication in that regard, and I understand the justification for that. And I'm very much sympathetic to the conversation. But I don't. If we're restricting it to not in abutting residential neighborhoods, I think the conversation around the sound, music, and I think the restriction around the size of the patios are not really addressing the concern with residents. So I'm fine with the 40 meters as a starting point, and I think we can always revisit whether 25 is the appropriate number after we have some experience with these throughout the city. But I think restricting the music and restricting the size in the way that we have it's hard for me to support. So I would put forward sort of a motion that would tweak that amendment. Thank you, to tweak that to allow electronic music in compliance with our noise bylaw, and to have a discussion, I guess, around the restriction of the size to 110 people as opposed to the 50 square meters. So I put that forward for debate.
Just for clarity on size, I think we're sticking to square meters. Would that be correct?
It's 110
So
people.
110 square meters.
No,
Is
it's
that what I
110
said?
people. It's 110 people. is
Just,
what he was talking about.
just to pause. Joel, can I get clarification just on whether it's people or size and how we zone?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, to council, my understanding of the statement is the license allowed for 110 people, and that the 50 square meters equated to 40 people. So the bylaw is drafted restricting it to 50 square meters of basically building floor area. So it's a size, area, and square meters that the bylaw is restricting, not the number of people.
Correct. So, and that's what we would want to state, not number of people, we'd still restrict it to size, which is measurable, right?
Yeah,
and
that's
so
correct.
maybe Councillor Bodley is probably thinking about 100 square meters, perhaps? I'm just trying to equate it to something. Commissioner Rapp?
Sir, I was just going to repeat that, yes, we would prefer square meters versus people because we would be able to regulate it through a building permit as opposed to continually counting bodies, which would be the Gaming Commission's role versus ours.
So 100 square meters would equate to roughly 80 people if 50 square meters is 40 people? Is that?
I think you're about right. We're doing quick math here, so what number are you thinking? 100 meters, 125? Sold.
Well, without having done my homework on exactly how that would work out, I suppose 100 square meters would be a fine sort of balance in there. And again, understanding that perhaps in the future we could revisit that number. I'd open that up for the rest of council's debate to hear what others have to say.
I just want to make sure we get this right. So to staff and to whoever wants to take it, based on these measurements that we're wordsmithing, numerically smithing here, if somebody didn't like them, their remedy is to go to Joel, what's the process?
Through Mayor Jaworski, there's two remedies. One, they could seek a zoning bylaw amendment from council, but more likely they would seek a minor variance from the Committee of Adjustment to adjust the regulations based on their site-specific considerations.
Okay. And that would apply to the 40 meters as well, as an example? Like, so we're leaving the 40 meters as 40 meters, but if somebody had different context, they wanted to take it to the Committee of Adjustment, they could?
That's correct.
Okay. So you're moving the motion to essentially allow ambient music, whatever we encapsulated there, set the size at 100 meters, 100 square meters?
Yes, sir.
Do I have a seconder for that well-crafted motion? Amendment. Councillor Veith. Councillor Veith. Not pretty good. It's pretty good. Okay, so now we're on to the amendment, not the main motion. So discussion on the amendment, please. Councillor Bonnegar, Councillor Veith, since you seconded it, we'll go with Councillor Veith first, then Bonnegar, then Dosick.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. Yeah, I think we should discuss it as a council, but I also think that until we actually have a rooftop patio, it's kind of like the new Ion. Let's see how things pan out before we decide what kind of parking projects we do in the uptown, right? Like, I just think it's like Joel said, if you want to amend it, there's ways to do that. But we can also amend our amendments, right? So, anyway, yeah, I just think we need to. It'll be cool to have a couple rooftop patios and just see what happens. So.
Okay. Councillor Bassick, Bonnegar.
Okay, through you, Mary. Out of curiosity, does anyone know how many square meters Ethel's patio is? Just to contextualize, so I understand how much is the 100 square meters.
Imagine 100 people on your deck.
I don't know if 100 people could fit in my backyard. No idea. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. No big deal. And then in terms of the noise, just because I'm in process of just working on a noise thing with a resident, I think it's a really, really sensitive issue. And I think some people, well, I know from what staff have been telling me too, is that some people hear a noise so much differently. And so even like, so if the noise becomes just one of those things you're constantly hearing, the decibel, even though it conforms to the bylaw, might actually to people be a lot louder. And so I do think it is a super sensitive issue. While I love the idea of rooftop patios, and I can think to a few that I've been through around the world just having this conversation, and they're amazing. And so I love the idea of having them too. I do like the idea of starting a bit smaller to see how it goes. So I'm not sure yet if I support your amendments, just that it's such a delicate issue. So I'm curious to hear what other people have to say.
Okay, we'll hear what Councillor Bonnegar has to say.
I also don't think I could get on board with those amendments, largely because, I mean, I love the idea of rooftop patios, don't get me wrong. If you ever go into Toronto and you have an evening out, they've got some beautiful rooftop patios. But from what I understand of these bylaws, the proposal here, it's reflective, it's very similar to what they have in Toronto, which basically provides for intimate rooftop patios, which aren't particularly loud, and they can actually provide a respite from the noisier clubs and pubs downstairs. And given that this is a starting point, I think it's, like, just my opinion is that it would be wise for us to start small and then reassess with the capacity to build up, rather than start big and then have to grandfather in things that we possibly might regret down the road. So that's where I would support the size limits that staff have put forward, largely because this is a test run and we're going to see how it goes. And again, it hopefully prevents us from having something bigger than we ultimately want in parts of the city. For the noise aspect, I totally understand what Councillor Vasik's saying, and noise travels in often erratic ways where something that seems like it should be soft ends up being amplified unexpectedly. And for Ward 7, for Uptown, where we do have large structures in existence, and there are going to be even more of them, that bouncing of sound is a concern for me, and how it could bounce over and across residential neighbourhoods. So down the track, like once we see how these are going, I think I'm more than happy to revisit that ambient music discussion. I think if it's kept low, it probably wouldn't be any louder than the clatter of plates or the chatter of people. But we also need to make sure we have enough bylaw staff to keep on top of that if there are complaints coming. So with all of those provisos in place, I will not be supporting the amendments.
I have a question of staff. Seems like council's having certainly thoughts on this, but we're establishing something ambient music in a zoning bylaw. Is that the appropriate place for it? I think it is. It just seems clumsy for us to be reopening that again. If we think, like, all of a sudden we rethink things next spring, do we open it again? Is that a big deal? Let me know your thoughts on that.
Through you, Your Worship, it's not likely the best venue to be trying to regulate noise through zoning bylaws. The noise bylaw exists generally for that purpose. We're trying through the bylaw to regulate the type of space, like what's actually occurring within that space, and trying to manage the land use compatibility issues between sensitivities of uses. So it's something that we believe is kind of on the gray area of zoning. It is a challenge ultimately for us to give council specifics on decibel levels and those types of matters at this point in time. We're simply trying to manage and suggest that if you provide these spaces noise, it's an elevated space, noise can travel, and the proximity issue to nearby residential uses can be problematic. The other consideration that staff gave is that we are an urbanizing municipality and we're intensifying, and that we're seeing more mixed-use development. So, for example, there are parts of the core today that may not have residential, but residential will come through intensification, and you have to kind of think forward towards potential compatibility issues. So again, we're trying to manage all of those considerations, as well knowing that you can go through processes to amend these regulations on site-specific considerations.
Thank you. And Mr. Rapp, please.
Certainly, just to add a couple of points to what Mr. Cotter said. Typically, through zoning, we try not to regulate operations. It's not really the place for it, same as hours of work type of thing. It's a land use framework within the Planning Act, not necessarily how someone operates. Live music is slightly different in that it is a use. It's not a decibel thing, it's a performance that's occurring, so it's a use as opposed to amplification and decibel reading. So that's how it would still be appropriate to have the live music, yay or nay, as a land use, but not necessarily other operations.
Just for clarity, we're talking about ambient music, not live, right? So I'm just wondering, how does ambient music apply as a land use? Is that? I just want to make sure we have we're voting on the right thing here.
I would view ambient as just, it's a term, really. It's tough for us to regulate ambient through, I wouldn't view it as a land use.
So I think what we had there was the, let me pull it up. Yeah, which one is that? Which letter? H. Electronic music sound. Okay, so the way this is written, is ambient music okay? Oh, that's the electronic part? I didn't know if that was like the Ever After Music Festival or whatever. Okay. Everybody have enough clarity? No further questions? Oh, Councillor Bodley? Oh, sorry. Commissioner Rapp?
Oh, I was just going to clarify. Electronic music, it's an actual device. It's a thing that you can actually see versus ambient is more of, it's more difficult to regulate. And that's why the use of electronic or sound equipment, yes, exactly. We can still take a look at that more clearly than trying to determine what's ambient.
Okay. Does anybody want these taken separate? I don't think so. Yeah, but there could have been two amendments. So I don't think anybody's asking for it. So, are we good? I'll call the question. All in favor? Oh, we're voting strictly on your amendments. And amendment moved by you, second by Councillor Veith, essentially on the size to 100 meters and the music allowed. Good rock music, good music. Electronic music that comes from speakers. All those in favor? All those opposed? The amendment fails. Did you catch the four? Okay, good. Okay, back to the original item on the table, put forth by Councillor Bonagor and somebody else that I don't recall. Any further discussion on the whole bylaw? Go ahead.
I'm just thinking, sorry, excuse me, through you, Mayor Jaworski. So I'm just thinking, if I'm going to just procedurally vote against this explicitly because of the restrictions of the rooftop patios, can we consider that separately from the rest of the discussion? Because I'm in favor of everything else that was put forward, and I don't want it, or
that'd be double voting. That's like double dipping. We don't allow that. Just clarifying. It would happen during budget season where we'd have everybody have their pet project. At the end of the day, we'd all vote against the budget because we had our pet project or whatever. So it just doesn't, it kind of doesn't work that way. Further discussion? Okay, call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? It's one. Thank you. Thank you, Dominic, Joel, Cam, Steve, everybody for all your input. The formal public meeting to consider official plan amendment number 18 and zoning bylaw amendment Z1721 Bell Communities Partnership Limited, 635 Herb Street West and 12 West Hill Drive has been deferred to a later date. Notice of the rescheduled formal public meeting will provide it in due course. And now we skip down to new business. Anybody have anything good to say? Councillor Veith?
Well, I just want to just a shout out to the regional staff for a great Ion opening. It was just a really fun thing to be at. It was the magic in the air kind of thing, and the ride was awesome. So anyway, Tom Galloway, and especially thanking him for all what he took for and to get this going. So and I brought it up here today. I rode my bike to the Research and Technology Park, got on the LRT with my bike, and it was full. It was pretty full. People were getting on and off, and I got off on Caroline Street, rode my bike to City Hall, and I hope to get back before dark, the same way I came. So anyway, I just want to say it was a great, and I hope everybody out there rides it while it's free, and for sure after. Anyway. Thanks.
And I think a special shout out to our own staff, Mr. Anderson, just because of all the team that came together to make the LRT a reality over the past 5 years, more years, especially like a lot of the transportation staff who were here earlier today with Transportation Master Plan. A lot of probably literally blood, sweat, and tears went into that from our own team to make it reality. And so thank you very much to the team for that. Please express our council thank you to them. Councillor Bonnegar.
While we're doing thanks, I would also like to do a big shout out to all of the staff, all of the volunteers, and the Uptown BIA for a huge weekend with the launch of the Ion. I haven't seen Uptown so vibrant, so busy, and people so excited to be spending time in the core. We had open streets, we had the Action Park demos, we had a concert in Waterloo Park, we had the summer the solstice sampling, we had sights and lights. Everything was happening, and it was really exciting to be part of that. So I just want to thank everyone.
True North.
And True North as well. Yeah. It's been a very big week, and it was a great way to cap it off. And I just wanted to really give kudos, especially to the volunteers who helped make those things really fly.
Yeah, it really sensed an inflection point in our community with the over the past 5 days, that it's really gone into a future mode right now. So the future has been realized. Councillor Hanmer, Councillor Vassic.
Thank you. The shout-outs continue on, and not everything happens in the core. I'm very excited to do a shout-out to the Westville Community Association for their 35th, actually, celebration, their festival and celebration. We also had, it was on Saturday afternoon, we also had staff with active transportation as well as the neighborhood rollout, so a good kickoff to how that strategy is going to roll out. Lots of volunteers kept it going too. So there is life outside of the core.
Hence your fondness for volunteers this afternoon. Good one. Councillor Vassic.
This isn't a shout out, but an invitation, because I know your networks span far and wide, but we have probably a big decision coming to council in the fall with the Parkview Cemetery and Crematorium, and there's a survey open right now, but then there's also the public consultation or information center on this Thursday, just before the Killam Westmount development. So 3 to 7 at Parkview itself. It's right at the corner of Bridge and University, so spread it far and wide, because I don't think there's been tons of uptake on the survey. Death and dying might not exactly be on everybody's agenda. I'd rather also go to a neighborhood party. So please spread it, though, because I think it's an important one, and it'll be a big decision that we have to make.
So first the event at the cemetery, then the Killam event. Okay. Okay. Anything further to close us down for June? Seeing nothing, we have to turn the page. So much for that excitement. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, geez. 13-ish bylaws. Moved by Councillor Veith, seconded by Councillor Hanmer. All those in favor? Motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Veith, seconded by Councillor Hanmer. We're adjourned. Thank you.